Hi, folks. It's Josh from Tough Call here, doing a live stream to answer your questions. I appreciate all the people that wrote in questions beforehand. I put this out about a week ago, and I got a lot of response for people with a lot of questions for what I do. The first question I'm going to answer is I wore this Oilers jersey on purpose because I get accused of being biased for a lot of teams. So I wanted to make sure everyone knew my true affiliation, which is the Edmonton Oilers. Particularly, I've been accused of being a Leafs fan this week a lot because of some of the things I've wanted to do to some of the Panthers players as far as suspensions go. But really, I'm just for protecting everybody, every team. I love the sport of hockey. I love every team. And I want to protect them all equally. I want to see every team's skilled player able to stay in the game and showcase that skill, showcase that talent. I don't want to see anybody on the sidelines. And I know if the Oilers are going up against the team, I want it to be against their best players. I want to make sure we see teams at their best and see the highest level of competition we possibly can. And we can't do that if we don't protect every player. We can't just protect stars, although we don't really do a good job of that anyway. But we need to protect all players. So I am an Oilers fan at heart, but I cheer for all teams and all players. And I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to stay in the game and showcase what they can do. So I'm going to get into some questions here. Like I said, I received a lot, so I organized them, and I'll try and get through them as best I can. The first one is from YouTube subscriber and user at MVP.113. I appreciate you taking the time to write a question. The question was, what's your experience with the game? I believe you coach and train in some capacity, and in a lot of videos, you say what you would do in certain situations. Yes, I do say what I would do. I think it's very important to say what you can do instead of the dangerous thing that you're saying players shouldn't do. You can't just tell everybody what not to do all the time. You have to give them options. You have to give them things that they can do instead. So that's what I try and do. I try and put myself in their shoes. And as a player, is it reasonable to expect them to do anything differently? So yeah, I try and make sure I say, well, here's your other options. You don't have to do specifically one or the other. Every player thinks differently. Every player approaches situations differently, and each situation is different. But ultimately, there's general mindsets you can use that are less dangerous, and that's what I would ask players to do. As far as my own background and experience, I played minor hockey in Cole Harbour. A lot of people know that place now. And then I played the highest level of midget you could play. And then I played a few years of junior. And I won, ironically, the most sportsmanlike player of the year in my last year of junior. But it doesn't mean I wasn't gritty. It doesn't mean I wasn't the type of player that wasn't willing to go into the dangerous areas. I spent a lot of time in front of the net. I was kind of known as a garbage goal king. I got a lot of goals, but most of them were from 5 feet or closer to the net, sometimes from right inside the net. So I know what it's like to go into these high danger areas where you're taking a good beating. And a lot of times the beatings that I took were pretty senseless. Trying to stand in front of the net and cross checks to the back of the neck and the lower back and the exposed kidneys and things like that. And we just saw that with Sam Bennett on Michael Bunting. And there's a lot of debate about, well, that's just what it takes to stand in front of the net. Well, why? Why is that what it takes to stand in front of the net? So my experiences have led me down this path. And now as a coach, I've coached all levels of hockey from 7-year-olds to 6-year-olds just starting out and junior players, high performance teenagers, college level players. I've coached a lot of players. I was the first coach for my area's major Bantam team. And I also coach rec league. Like every skill level, every age group, I've coached it. I work with it. I have my own skating schools. I've done hockey schools, and I teach checking clinics. And that's the most important part of my background is I'm certified to teach checking clinics. Players can't play body contact hockey unless they take a clinic that's put on by their governing body in their area. And I am one of the people that's able to teach that. So when people say, you always say, have you ever played a day in your life when when people make comments and they say something that you think is ridiculous. It's good chirping and stuff. But yeah, not only have I played a lot of hockey, but I I also am generally coming from a place where I know the material. When we say things like player, the first thing we teach players is to not turn their back by the boards. Well, that's not necessarily true, and there's some context to that. And I actually teach the material that I'm talking about, so I do have a little bit of expertise in the matter. It's not coming from a place of ignorance and a place of I just don't understand hockey. It's coming from a place where I just want to express that these are the thought processes behind what we teach children, behind what we teach younger players, midget players, even that are about to step up into some pretty high level, intense physical hockey, including introducing the fighting aspect of it. So, um, we want to make sure that we understand what these players are being taught so you can maybe see what their habits are and why they do some of the things they do that you don't like. And in turn, I try and look at it from the other point of view and understand why players, where they get the ideas to do the things that I don't necessarily like. Who is actually telling them to do the things that they do? So my background is highly involved in hockey and trying to figure out everyone's point of view and see if we can come to some sort of common ground that allows the physicality without avoidable needless danger. There's going to be some danger, there's going to be some element of danger in hockey, but how can we avoid the needless danger that doesn't need to be there? So that's a great question. I appreciate the question. uh, Surveyor Brett on Twitter. I know him pretty well. We have some chats. He's a contributor to the Heavy Hockey Network, and he writes the question that I get all the time, which is, why are you so insistent on trying to change the game and ruin hockey? People ask me that a lot. Why do I want to ruin hockey? Well, I guess it depends on your point of view. I don't necessarily feel like I'm trying to ruin hockey. I want to try and encompass all that hockey is. Hockey is skill, and hockey is inherently physically violent. There's a lot of violence and physicality that goes into it that I actually enjoy. I like big hits. I like high speed impact. I like a lot of excitement and energy and things moving fast and a lot of moving parts. And I like battles. I love going into gray, dirty areas and battling for position. What I don't like is when players resort to cross checking and spearing and ultimately shenanigans that aren't really part of hockey. There's going to be some gamesmanship and a little bit of fun. I get it. But I don't feel like hockey would be ruined if we didn't cross-check people in the face after the whistle. If every time the goalie covered the puck, players didn't go into those scrums and face wash each other and rip their helmets off and stuff. I'd like to see them drop the puck and keep the game moving and see some hockey. That's what I want to see. And hockey, part of it is big hits. What part of hockey isn't to me is skating over to the corner and spearing a guy, giving him a cup check well after the whistle, or things like that. Like, that's not hockey to me, and I don't think the game would be any worse off with that. And also, I feel like what I would do would add the good physicality. So we want big hits, but what I'd like to see, I'm probably the only person in the world that likes the instigator rule, because every time there's a big hit, there's a fight. Why do we want that? We want to see more hitting, right? We want to see more high speed impact. So why, after there's a really nice, solid, thunderous body check, the thing everybody wants, do we also then want to see somebody go fight them? So when there's a hit that happens, if I say I want to suspend someone for that hit, people go, "You're crazy. Well, what do you want to take hitting out of hockey? Why are you going to suspend a guy?" And then at the same time, they say, "Well, that guy had it coming. He deserves a beating." Well, which is it? Was it a clean hit and I'm ridiculous to suspend them, or was it dirty, and was it dirty enough to go have somebody fight over it? To me, if it's a clean check, we should just walk away from it and hope for more. Why would we want to fight and stop it all? I see someone just joined viewing and just said hello. I appreciate it. Good to see you here, and I hope this is a helpful exercise to get to understand where I'm coming from. So yeah, look, I don't see how I'm trying to ruin the game. I like to think that what I would do would improve the game and give more of what we want to see, which is the actual big body checks, the high speed, high velocity pace of play that we want to see without slowing it down with all these scrums and whistles and fights. Uh, to me, that's not hockey. Steve McEwen, Twitter user, asked me, what is the biggest change you would make to ensure that games didn't devolve into a gong show after bad or even clean hits? Well, I just touched on that a little bit. Um, what I would do is go harder in scrums. If you put your hand anywhere near someone's face washes, that's supposed to be a roughing penalty or unsportsmanlike conduct. I know it sounds petty, and what are you trying to do here? It's just a face wash. Um, but it, like I said, it takes away from the game. It drags everybody down. It slows the pace down. It's a great tool for players or teams who in general are having a hard time in that moment and can't keep up. I'm not saying in general, but sometimes we all have our moments where the momentum changes from one team to another. And when your team doesn't have the momentum, you like to slow the game down and get into those tactics of getting in their face and getting them frustrated and see if you can suck them into something besides playing hockey. And to me, that detracts away from the game. What you're doing is removing hockey and allowing non-hockey things to flourish and actually take away from the hockey that's being played. Why don't we ask that team to pick their socks up and play hockey to counter the hockey that's being played? Why do we allow them to use strategies like face washing and fighting and taking runs at players? And people say, you want to throw a big check to liven your team up. That's great, but you can't force a big check when one isn't there. That's when the danger starts. If you happen to make a big check and your team gets fired up from that, that's great. That's what I want to see. That's how you get your team in the game. But you don't necessarily go running around looking for it and forcing it when it isn't there. That's the kind of stuff I'd like to see out. So basically, the way to keep the game, in my opinion, from devolving into a gong show is to call the rule book. Call it when it's 4-1 or 1-1. Call it when it's a preseason game or a regular season game. Call it when it's the first round or game 7 triple overtime of the Stanley Cup final. Call the rule book. That's the only thing you can do. You can't change the rules from situation to situation. You can't allow teams that are down to play by different rules, and you can't allow teams that are up to play by different rules. You shouldn't be calling penalties based on whose turn it is to get a penalty, for instance. If one team has 4 power plays because they're outplaying the other team, they have the puck more, and the other team's chasing and having to grab them, then so be it. That's the advantage of being the better team on that day. You shouldn't try and even things up or not call things. And if a team is already down 5-on-4 and they take a penalty, put that down 5-on-3. That's how you keep these things from getting out of hand. You try and it's I know people in the NHL say they want violence and they want the emotions to stay high. That's what they want. But to me, the way to keep the gong showness down is to keep the emotions down. It doesn't mean to say players can't play with passion, be emotional, be physical, and want to win battles. That's the kind of thing I like. That's exciting energy. You can see that there is emotion there. What we can't have is the temper tantrums we see where players lash out at other players or slam their stick and the pieces fly into the crowd and that sort of thing. Those are needlessly dangerous things that grown men should be able to control their emotions, and they shouldn't be put in an environment. We shouldn't allow those things to happen to let the games get out of hand just because we feel bad and don't want to put a team down any more than they already are. It is what it is. And Steve McEwen also asks, do you believe all upward explosion should be classified as attempt to injure as there is no reason for it to be involved with hitting? That's a tough one to me. It really is. I talk about upward explosion a lot. I don't really see, and I teach checking, like I said, and I've delivered a lot of checks in my life. I've taken a lot of checks in my life, that's for sure. And the ones I appreciate are good, hard ones where people don't take advantage of me just because I made myself vulnerable. You don't need to explode to counter body checking, to counter the force that's coming. Even a player skating at speed, you don't need to explode. You just need to lean slightly into that to allow your body to absorb the impact. So you don't need to explode and drive out. The only time you do that is when you want to increase the force of a check. when you want to increase the violence of the impact. And think about what I just said. I want to try and avoid needless violence. I want the speed of the game, the organic speed of the game, to make the body checking what it is. When two players are going at full speed and they run into each other, it's going to make a big impact. You do not need to launch yourself into that impact or explode in any way to make it any more violent than it already is. The only reason you would do that is to make it more violent, which doesn't make any sense to me. We shouldn't be allowing players to do that. Now, if it was just the amount of violence that increased, so be it. But here's where I'm coming from: is we talked about this. I talked about this with a Jacob Trouba hit recently. I see those questions in the chat, by the way, and I will get to them. I appreciate it. I will discuss those in a minute and then get back to my list. I just want to finish this question, and then I'll start answering some of those. I really appreciate you tuning in and writing those questions. So the Jacob Trouba hit recently, where there was a big debate about whether it was head contact or not. I think it was Nico Hischier, and his head was down. First of all, the term head down, players can have their head in a vulnerable spot. It doesn't mean it was down. He was actually looking up. He just wasn't really processing his surroundings. It wasn't like he was caught down looking at the puck and had no idea what was going on. In my explanation video, I actually see how he does try and take evasive maneuvers, and Trouba is constantly reassessing and relining himself up for that impact. And Hischier is eligible to be checked there. There's no doubt about it. You are allowed to make a body check there. Jacob Trouba was right to step in and try and take his body away. But we're talking about explosion. And in that case, I think there was excessive violence to the check that didn't need to be there, even though head contact was avoidable. Was unavoidable. I agree with the NHL that they said it was unavoidable because of the posture of the puck carrier. That's great, but you don't need to push your back foot on the ice, plant it, and drive out with your shoulder. You just need to put yourself in a lane where that player's going to skate into you. That's what I mean about explosion. And then I did a video you can see on my YouTube of Jake McCabe, a hit on Matthew Tkachuk, where Matthew Tkachuk avoided the hit, and Jake McCabe almost jumped right over top of him, came off his feet. Because I can't remember, an ex-NHLer, I can't remember who it is, I feel bad now, said the problem we don't like with Jacob Trouba is that he actually just learned how to time these hits properly. And he does. He times it well so that when he explodes at a moment where it's going to go generally through the chest, but he's on an upward trajectory. So the problem with timing your check is that as soon as you plant and launch, you now forfeit any ability to control the timing of that check and where you're going to hit. As soon as you start to go upward and outward with no control, if explode up like that, then you're going to eventually get to a point where you're going to go up off your feet. And if you time it right, and that player's here and you go up, then you're going to hit them here. But if that player bails like Matthew Tkachuk did, suddenly you're going up and they're not where they're supposed to be anymore. And all of a sudden you're higher than you planned on being. And eventually you come off your feet. So why do you want to explode and take that risk? What if you time it wrong? There's too much danger that's involved in timing hits wrong. So if you stay on your plane and don't explode and just glide into contact, you can lean out a little, but that's about as far. You don't need to push and lunge. So that if contact could happen now, if that player turns or stops, or it doesn't matter because your posture hasn't changed and you'll still hit the core no matter what. But the second you start to explode up and out, your shoulder will rise up, everything rises up. And if you don't time it right, you're hitting the head. And to me, that is not unavoidable. You're making even unavoidable head contact more dangerous by putting extra force and timing it wrong. So to me, do I think all upward explosions should be automatically classified as an attempt to injure? I don't think so, because some players do time it right. And I don't think you can honestly judge people before impact happens. But what I will caution players about explosion is that in my system, if you explode, then you are going and you hit the head. If you explode up and that's the cause of you hitting the head, then you no longer have any free pass just because a player has put themselves in a vulnerable position. That's a case of you taking advantage of that player. So do I think we should ban explosion and call it intent to injure? I don't think so. I think players will try and do that when they're making a legal body check, and you can, in some situations, time it right. But if you time it wrong and you hit the head, I can punish you extra hard because you weren't taking the proper precautions. You were making unnecessary danger on that hit. I'll get to some more of the written questions that people pre-wrote in, but I'm going to answer some of these in the chat because I really appreciate that you're here, and I want to give you the attention you deserve because you're actually here right now. Thank you for saying that you recently subscribed. I'm glad you enjoy my content, and because of the amount of subscribers I've gained recently, I think I gained 500 or more subscribers since the playoffs started. That really motivates me to put out more content. It really motivates me to want to explore more and start more discussions. And that's partly why I decided to do this YouTube live video, because of the encouragement I've been getting from people like you. So I super appreciate the support. I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate you, if you don't mind sharing my stuff and getting more eyes on it and more discussion. Am I an Oilers fan? Absolutely. I said off the top of the show, the reason I wore this is because depending on the teams that I'm suspending more frequently, I've been accused of being a biased fan of pretty much every team in the league now. And sometimes in the same series, I've been accused of being biased towards both teams in the same series. So that tells me that I'm doing right. Sorry, I was distracted by a message that came up there. But so if I'm accused of being biased for both teams in a series, I think I'm doing something right. I think that means I'm being objective. And if you look at my channel and some of the suspensions, you'll see that I treat each team, or try to, as best as I can, treat each team fairly. You'll see suspensions for players of all teams. And even sometimes I'm the hero and the villain in some stories, because someone like, say, Tom Wilson is obviously someone that invokes a lot of emotion whenever he throws a hit. And now it's Jacob Trouba. He invokes a lot of response. And guys, sometimes what he does is clean. And I'm more than willing to admit when he makes a nice, clean body check, because that's what I want. I want to see these players ultimately succeed in checking the right way and being the best player they can be. And part of Jacob Trouba's gift to hockey is his ability to throw a body check. Like I said, I don't want to discourage that. I want to encourage it, but I want to encourage it to be done the right way. What the right way isn't necessarily what I'm saying. What I mean is that things aren't working right now. There's a lot of head trauma. So we need to come to some sort of understanding about what we expect players to do. Players will certainly do things differently than I like at times, but that doesn't necessarily make it wrong or right or even dirty. I don't think a lot of these guys are dirty players that are just looking to injure. I think they know what the rules are right now, and they work to the best of their ability to take advantage of the rules as they are currently called right now. And you cannot fault them for that. They're just trying to give themselves the competitive advantage. Thoughts on the fast hit on Graves yesterday? Now, I haven't put a video out on that yet, and I plan on it. But in general, I'll tell you what I'm looking for. My instinct is that he covered a lot of ground, and the charging rule is about distance traveled. And a lot of people interpret that rule as you need to be still striding when you make contact. If you are able to glide at all, then it's not a charging. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that line of thinking, because I think you can gain a lot of force, a lot of excessive force on a player based on the distance traveled. And the charging rule, the way it's written, covers that. It says, as a result of distance traveled, will check or jump into an opponent in any manner. And with this much distance traveled, you do need to factor in, did he do enough to slow himself up or take the proper angle of approach on impact? So that's what I'm going to be looking at for those strides. I actually haven't seen like many replays yet. So I will, before I make a final ruling, I'd like to look at it a little more. And that's the other thing we have to understand, is officials don't get that benefit. Officials have to make split-second decisions, and I really feel for them. I do think the NHL is the hardest sport to officiate at any level. There's just so much that goes on, and the way the rules are written, they have to take so many of these factors into account, and they have to go through them lightning quick, especially where we live in a world where players are instantly jumped for dirty or clean hits. It doesn't matter. So if a ref has the chance to get their hand up and call it a penalty, it might deter some of that jumping, but at the same time, they have to process things so quickly that you often can't get there before the players do attack. So as far as that hit goes, it was a lot of distance traveled. It was a violent impact with the boards, but it was shoulder to shoulder. It was on the front, and uh, the angle of approach was good. So, but my first thought is that it's not a horrific hit, but then I'm going to have to look at the replay for more detail and just see how I feel about distance traveled and excessive force and that sort of thing. I'm going to try and take a look. There's so many questions. They're flying off the screen before I can get to them. Okay. Uh, okay, Sharks and Hurricanes fan. See, I have a Hurricanes in the. I called them before the playoffs started. If you guys had saw, I do a video where I actually do my playoff predictions. I have a board that has magnets on it. It's the playoff tree, and every team has a magnet, and I just slide through. So you guys should check that video out. It's called Playoff Predictions, and I have the Canes in the conference final. I really think this is their year to do some damage, and they look pretty good right now. I don't want to jinx it. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. Hello to you too. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the hockey. Do I think the Flyers will ever be good again? Jeez. That's a tough question. I gotta tell you. I love Carter Hart. I really do. I think he's put in a place where it's very difficult to succeed. For all the things that are said about John Tortorella, I think he's probably the right man for the job to kind of shake the culture up. At the very least, if you don't like John Tortorella, I think he's just so polar. I think he's just so engaging and so opinionated. You know what I mean? That I think players would have no choice but to listen. I don't think players will have any choice but to react in some way. So players that were kind of just floating around and flying by the seat of their pants and just kind of going through the motions. Well, you can't go through the motions under a coach like that. So whether you think that's the coach that's going to take you to the promised land or not, at least it was the coach you needed to get players to stand up straight and actually take notice that something's got to give. So I don't think it's going to take as long as some rebuilds do. For the most part, the NHL is too talented. Players in the NHL are too talented. All rosters are too deep to stay at the bottom of the barrel for too long if they just get the right mix of emotion and character. I think that's what it's going to take. Is just being willing to refuse to lose. You get to a point where you're just not satisfied anymore. And I think every team goes through those swings. And I think Philadelphia is a place that is ready to go on the upswing, and they just refuse to lose at this point. So will it take a long time? In my opinion, I don't think it will take that many years, but I kind of am talking in generalities about all rebuilds. I think rebuilds, if done right, won't take long. Do I think they should trade Hart? Probably not. I think he hasn't been put in a place where you can get a good enough of an idea of what he's going to offer. Because to expect anyone to stand in there in that dumpster fire that it is right now and succeed, it's a lot to ask. So I think you just need to give it a fair shake. I think you need to get yourself on the right path, give it a fair shake. You let the players that are there, that want to be there. Now, I'm not in the room, that's the other thing. But if these players want to be there, then you give them another chance and give them a few more years, a little bit of a longer leash. If there's players that are attitude problems, then they're just not putting the effort in and they're not being professional. That's one thing. I'm not in the room to see that. But as far as like you said, you might get a good return for them. I always look at what you're giving up. So when you trade Carter Hart, what are you looking for? Well, you're probably looking for someone similar to Carter Hart. So I don't know if it'd be worth it to trade him when you haven't really given him the proper look and the proper environment to be the type of player you think he could be. I think we need to give him that one shot. Kotkaniemi hit on Hischier. It was beautiful. Um, yeah, it was. I mean, it was a fun hit to watch. I don't know why players do these butt checks. Uh, I noticed Matthew Kachuk used to be the king of it. He always turned his back and throw hits. I know Cronwall used to do it. This was a very Nicholas Cronwallian hit. But with turning your back comes responsibility. All of a sudden, you can't see what part of the body you're going to hit. You don't know when impact is going to happen. You don't know if the player behind you has made a sudden shift. So that's where explosion comes into play. The second you put yourself in a spot where it's contact now or never, and you've taken away the ability to time it and change your angle, you have to be super careful not to explode up and put yourself in a position where you might hit a head that's higher than you think. Like even a head that's down, if you go up through it, it's still your fault if you really do some damage there and knock that player out. So you have to be careful that you're staying on your feet. So that's another hit I have to look at. I haven't really looked at a lot of the hits from last night other than a quick glance. Quick glance to me, it's great. Great time in the game. There was a lot of hitting going on in that game in that moment. So my instinct as a fan was to really love it. Now I got to take a look at it as a sort of the eyes of player safety and see how I feel. But I'll get to that later on. I'm going to get back to some of the questions that were pre-written. Why do I hate all 32 teams? What did they do to hurt you and make you so biased? I left that question. I could have chosen not to answer that question. But again, that's why I had the Oilers jersey on. For those of you just tuning in, I'm not biased against 32 teams. I'm biased against danger, and I'm promoting skill and hockey purpose-based contact. I don't think you should hit for the sake of hitting. I think you should hit for a hockey purpose. And so if you're not doing that, it doesn't matter what team you play for, it doesn't matter what jersey you play for, you're just going to have to be clean in my system. That's the way it is. So at John Kadrowski, Twitter user, asks, do you think a former player is the best person to be running the DOPS? And if not, who could be better, a former official or a coach, for example? Honestly, anyone who's willing to go against the old guard would make a good fit. I'm not a person that really believes that someone has to have played hockey in order to coach it. You don't have to have played hockey at any certain level to commentate on it or to have good ideas. Every opinion is valuable. So I think there's something to be said for people who've never played hockey, because people get stuck in this old mindset of, well, that's just the way hockey is. And you hear all the time comments like, if you played, you'd understand. Well, to me, like the code, like if it's so easy to understand, then you shouldn't have to play. Somebody that has played should be able to explain it to that person. But the only reason you can't explain it is because it doesn't make any sense. I think romantically, there's some old school mentality there that you just want to like the code. But the truth is that all teams and players play by a different one. And you hear all the time players say after a big hit, well, I went after him because I don't care whether the hit was clean or dirty. I just saw my guy go down and I wanted to step up and defend him. Well, to me, that's why the instigator rule exists. Because if you don't care, if you want to avenge someone for a dirty hit, you want to go fight them, that's great. But if you're going to go after them and take them out no matter what they did anyway, whether it was clean or dirty, what's the point of playing clean? So there's a little mentality like that. And I said off the top of the show, like, if you're going to fight someone after a clean hit, well, what are we even doing? That people think I want to get rid of hitting, but I like to see good, clean contact. And I don't know why the players don't, because if it's clean or dirty, if their guy goes down, they're going to go after that player no matter what. And to me, that doesn't make any sense. And it makes sense to people who play hockey. Well, you got to defend your teammate at all costs. But if you're on the outside of hockey looking in, you might be able to look at that from a different point of view and say, start asking why. Why are we doing this? Why has it always been that way? And if you can't come up with a good answer besides, well, if you played, you get it, then there's probably not a good answer there. You might have to reevaluate the whole thing. And that's what I'm trying to do, is come at it from a different mindset. As someone who loves hockey, as someone who enjoys big contact, as someone who has played very physical contact hockey and played in a league that was making national headlines in Canada for its violence, for line brawls and things. The team I played for was very groundbreaking in that we didn't, in my junior training camp, they didn't allow fighting because they said that's not the kind of team we want to be. We'll fight if we have to, but we're not going to allow fighting. We're in our training camp because we want to see what you can do skill wise and we want to see what you can do without that. Uh, Obviously, that was hard to maintain in the league we went to, but that was the mindset we had. And if you can change the mindset, the way we approach hitting now is from well, this leads into the next question, so I'm going to read it. Taryn Bolton, Twitter user, my sister, asks, what even is the benefit of hitting in the game? Why not just body contact? And I say all the time, I don't want to take the hitting out of hockey. I want to put the hockey back in hitting. And what I mean by that is I don't like the term hit. You'll never see it in the literature for Hockey Canada stuff. For checking clinics, you don't see the word hit. It's always body contact. It's always check. You want to deliver a check. You don't want to throw a hit. A hit isn't something, body contact isn't something you throw. It's really not even something you deliver. That indicates that there's some sort of action you're doing at the end that makes the contact. And to me, that's the difference between checking and hitting. Checking is actually just the result of the process of all the things you can do that might not even involve body contact. Whereas hitting is actually going out of your way to make contact. That's a hit. A check to me is the finishing of a process of angling, getting your stick in the right spot. You're going stick on puck, then you're going hands on hands, and then shoulder on shoulder. And then if necessary, the way your bodies are positioned and the speed of the game goes, you're going to make contact that way. But you're not actually looking only to hit. You can see when guys dump the puck in. There's two different types of players. There's players that dump the puck in, just like the hit on Graves there last night that we're talking about. Fast on Graves. You dump the puck in and you see the defender going, they have their back turned and they're going back towards the puck, and you think, oh boy, I got them. I can't wait to get to there because I can ram this guy. And if you have that in your mind before the puck is dumped in, then you're already doing something wrong because you're overcommitted to that hit. What if that player falls and the puck is free? Well, I've seen too many players actually skate right over top of the puck to make body contact, when the whole point of body contact is to separate your opponent from the puck so you can get the puck. And too many people go in just thinking they want to get a hit in. And you hear all the time, oh, I get a hit in to get myself in the game, or teams are down, so they say, we need a big hit. You start to get in trouble because you're going to force hit. So you're going to force contact when it isn't there. Like explode and lunge out and reach and do things. Situation where you're going to make contact when contact is no longer there, when players have made themselves vulnerable, when they turn their back. So you always hear people say players turn their back, and that automatically gives a free pass to a lot of people. They look at it and they say either a player turned their back, so it's no penalty at all, or they didn't turn their back, so now we have to look at the hitter. But the onus is always on the hitter. As someone has in the comments, just ask Lindros, Scott Stevens was the king of hitting. And someone else said, yeah, the king of blindside headhunting. And that's, to me, the crux of the argument. Whether what Scott Stevens did in each individual hit was legal or not, his intent was always to sit back and catch some poor sucker crossing the line with their head down, and he was going to drive into them. And he was looking for that hit. And to me, that makes it predatory. So you go look at that and say clean. Is there a difference between clean and dirty? Well, to me, clean by the rule book, but dirty in intent. And in no way am I thinking we should punish people for intent, because you can't get inside their head. But there's a difference between the actions that you take looking for body contact or just out looking for a hit. And if you're out looking for a hit, those are the things that cause you to do the most dangerous things, to force the hit when it's not there. So you'll see in my suspension videos, my suspension scale, I have non-hockey play and hockey play gone wrong. To me, a hockey play gone wrong is when you're going in, you have your stick down, you have your stick on puck, and you put a shoulder on a guy, and they go into the boards, and you might get a boarding penalty, but it's just a minor penalty because it wasn't bad. They turned their back and they went into the boards violently. Sometimes it's not even a penalty, and sometimes it's just a hockey play. Sometimes hockey plays go wrong and there's nothing you can do about it. But if you go into the same situation with your stick up in two hands and you don't look at the puck, you just look at the player and you go in and you lean back and you push in like that, to me, it's a non-hockey play. You're no longer doing it just for the sake of getting the puck. You're in there just for contact. Nothing about what you're doing. I don't need to get in your mind and ask what you were doing because I can't judge on that. You could tell me you didn't mean to do it, and I'd believe you. But everything that you did means that it wasn't surprising that it happened. So, like I said, I want to get rid of avoidable, needless contact that's dangerous, and I want to keep in the reasonable hockey purpose, hockey related contact. So that's how I view things. Now, having said that, not going for the puck isn't automatically a penalty on its own. It's a lot like explosion. Exploding into a hit isn't necessarily a penalty on its own if you time it right. Just like avoiding the puck completely and going to lay the body isn't a penalty all on its own. But I tell you what, if you do something wrong, like hit the head, or the player gets rid of the puck and you hit them with not in that window of time anymore because you're so worried about getting the hit in. If you do things that show me you're not worried about the puck, then when things go wrong, absolutely your punishment should be worse than someone who's actually looking for the puck. If you never have your stick on the ice in a situation approaching contact, the other thing is you're always going to be up like this. If you have your stick on the ice, your knees naturally bend, you naturally stay lower, and your contact is going to go straight through. But if you have your stick up, you're naturally going to want to rise up, and everything goes up and out then. And that's when you get into trouble. So not only is it more hockey related to go for the puck, even if you want to make a hit, the safest way to hit is with your stick on the ice and your knees bent and everything low. There's no need to rise up. So for every purpose you could possibly imagine, avoiding the puck and doing things that are going to make sure you don't get the puck are creating all the needless danger. And that's why I go harder on that. It's the same thing as I tell people when they want to be selfish hockey players and want to get the puck all the time. Well, the most selfish place to be is third player high in the offensive zone, because if a player is doing all the work in the corner for you, they're going to pass it to you out third guy high. So not only is it selfish because you want to get the shots, you're selfish and get that pass. You're also begrudgingly in the best possible defensive position you could be in for if your team turns the puck over and team turns the puck over, and now you're the high player that can stop that. So in a selfish way that leads to offense, you're actually playing the best defense you can. Well, if you want real solid body contact and you want more hitting, the most reasonable way to do that is to actually focus on the puck more, because you'll get the type of contact you want. We won't see the penalties and the danger. We'll just see more contact, more physicality, more battles. That's what I want to see in hockey. Would I like to see hockey, or would I like to see hitting in women's hockey? Why or why not? I think that they go too far between non-contact hockey and contact hockey. I think the difference is too great. I think they need to allow more physicality, allow more contact. I'm not saying full-on body contact, but in the younger levels, in women's hockey and non-contact hockey, they need to allow more competitive contact. Because most of the things, if you're doing it right, like I said, a real true body check that we teach in checking clinics is simply the culmination of a 5-step process of angling, stick checking, going stick on puck, going hand on hand, and bumping shoulder on shoulder. You can do all those things before actually delivering a body check. So that's the type of stuff you should be teaching kids when they're growing up. You need to let them do battle drills and competitive contact and lean on each other. And we need to make body checking not that big a deal, so that when they get older, too many players that I come to my checking clinic are like, oh, now I get to cream somebody. Now hockey really begins. Well, that's totally the wrong way to look at it. And things have definitely improved to the point where when I used to do checking clinics 10, 15 years ago, you'd ask players, first question you ask them is, why do you have hitting in hockey? And they always say, to separate the opponent from the puck. That's the right answer, but it's the only answer. And 10 years ago, I'd get answers like removing the player from the puck, intimidation, and revenge. Like these are legit answers the players thought were right because that's what they heard growing up. And you don't hear that as much anymore. The mentality is changing, but I think we've overcalled it. And I think maybe this is the fear that people have based on my rules for the NHL. If you overcall it, um, the game kind of goes away from it. I get that fear. I just don't see the logic behind it because players still do it because that's just part of playing hockey. The unfortunate part is they're getting called. You see kids get a penalty for being bigger because one player will go down, another player didn't, and automatically they look at it like, oh, that was over aggressive contact. We have to give a penalty here just to make it look good, just for optics. I think we need to get away from that. I think we need to let kids figure it out, to learn the timing. There's going to be high impact in contact hockey. There's going to be impact in non-contact hockey. And we just have to allow that to happen organically as part of the game. Let players do more leaning on each other, rubbing out on the boards, that sort of thing. And same thing with women's hockey. The women, actually, if you watch it, there is quite a bit of violence and hitting in hockey. And for some reason, in the games between Team Canada and Team USA, they let it go a lot more than when those two teams play other teams. I think if they allowed that type of contact in all the women's game, I think we'd see a better product. To the same extent, in the NHL, uh, I think they let way too much go. They're afraid to call anything. There's overcalling, and then there's being afraid to call anything and letting things go too much. And that's what the NHL allows, is too much focus on hitting that isn't related to hockey. They allow the hitting for intimidation. They allow the hitting for revenge. They allow cross checks to the head for net battles as part of hockey. I don't subscribe to that thought process. If you want players to battle, let them battle it out. Let them lean on each other. Let them go hard. But as soon as someone starts to lose the battle and they feel like they need to resort to a cross check to the head, like Bennett did, I don't think they deserve to be in that position and get away with that. Now, I know you're going to say he got a minor penalty and he got fined, but how many times does that go uncalled? That's just my example. How many times does that go uncalled? It's like an accepted part. Officials look at it and they see 2 or 3 cross checks and they reluctantly call the fourth one because they have to, because there's been so many now. If you just call the first one and make players realize that that's not a reasonable way to defend the front of the net, then it wouldn't resort to that, and they'd have to resort to other things like using their gift. These are the best skaters in the world. These are the strongest players, most gifted skaters, the strongest athletes. They should be better at body positioning. So to me, if you can't play in the NHL without resorting to cross-checking in the head, without resorting to checking from behind or taking runs at people to get yourself into the game, then maybe you shouldn't be there. And maybe we should give that spot to someone who's more willing to play a hockey-focused role and be less of a villain. So this kind of ties into a question I see there. What do I think of Matthew Tkachuk's game? Matthew Tkachuk is a super skilled player, but he really shouldn't be in this playoffs still. He's done too many things that are dangerous, including that cross-check to the back of Hathaway in round 1. He's such a good player. He's so physical. He could encompass everything I talk about with good physicality. That is a strong player. He's a great skater. He's gifted with the puck. But the NHL allows him to be a person or the type of player that goes off of that. He gets away from that too much. Now, he did about, 100-point season. He's in the running for the MVP of the playoffs. And yeah, in the playoffs as it's designed now, I also think he would be an MVP player if we didn't allow those things to happen. He could be just as gifted and talented and useful to a team in a more skill and hockey contact-based game than he would be without, if in a sport right now where they allow the cross-checking to the back and all that. Do you really think the game would be worse off if we didn't see that happen? I don't think so. I'm not trying to take away hitting. I'm not trying to take away good physicality. I'm not trying to take away net battles. And a lot of times people say, well, what do you expect them to do in a situation? If you didn't like that hit, what do you expect them to do? Just walk around them and not hit it all? No. There's definitely a middle ground between headhunting and not checking it off. I don't know why we always think that. There could be the most dangerous hit in the world, and people will say, if we punish that, then we might as well remove hitting altogether. And that's a bad way to look at it because there's way too many examples. I have a whole playlist called Clean Checks. I have 3 videos out that are called Clean Checks compilations. And let me tell you which videos get the most views. The most views that I get are Kachuk hits, Trouba hits, Tom Wilson hits, and Brad Marchand hits. I could just put any video, type their name in the search bar, put their name in the title, so people will search it, and those videos will get more views than any of the clean checks people claim they want to see. I have a whole video playlist of clean checks, and nobody watches them, even though they're beautiful, great, high impact ones, because they're not polarizing. And I get that, but people say we don't have any more open ice hitting. Well, yes, we do. I have a whole channel full of open ice hitting. Players are hitting the right way all the time, but the 2 or 3 times they hit the wrong way, those are the ones that you think are going to get rid of hot hitting altogether. I don't think so. And those are good examples of players that don't explode, don't launch, don't lunge. They just put themselves in a lane, they get a proper angle, and players run into them. And that's what a good check should be. It's a positional check, kind of like a goalie making a positional save. The most flashy saves are the ones where the goalie has to dive way across the net and reach out and just barely get the puck with the tip of their finger, and it's the most exciting save in the world. But it also means that they were out of position. A really smart, proper positional goalie, for the most part, will just make these saves that look so easy. They're not exciting because they're in the right spot and the puck just hits them. And that's what body contact is for the most part. Players just bump into each other through the natural course of play. The difference between non-exciting saves that just hit the logo because the goalie's in the right spot is players move so fast that even the most mundane contact, if you see 2 players going into the corner, even the most mundane contact could have the most explosive results. These open ice checks, north-south body contact, players are going to collide at high speed, and they're already going to be exciting enough without having to add to it, because that's what causes the danger. That's what causes the severe trauma, and we don't need it. We could still have just as exciting high impact hitting when players are in vulnerable positions without launching into them. What would I change, or would I change the rules for fighting to try and eliminate it from the NHL? Oh, sorry, just to follow up on that. I see a comment in Sweden, they changed rules so women can check too. That's fantastic. I didn't know that. I think that's great. I really think that's the way we should go here. But I think that what they have to do is be willing to introduce it and call the rule book. You can't introduce it the way that it is now. I don't necessarily agree entirely with the international standard either. With head hits, I'm kind of going off the board here, but with head hits, I do agree that there shouldn't be a blanket rule for head contact. All head contact should be penalized. I do agree with the NHL when they say that there is such thing as unavoidable head contact. You can stay low and do the right things, and because of a player putting themselves in a vulnerable position, their head will get struck, and it might even be the principal point of contact. Like the NHL rule states, if head contact is unavoidable and we can't ask the player to do anything differently, then I think we have to let that go. It's going to be just the natural result of playing hockey. So I kind of get caught in the middle here because I agree with people when they say things like that. Hey, you don't want to see that happen? Play a different sport. But I just don't think it applies to the same number of hits that people think it does. I think there can be unavoidable head contact where players still approach it in avoidable ways, if you know what I mean, that make the head contact worse than it needs to be. So that's where I fear introducing it into the women's game will go, is that all of a sudden it will become no holds barred like every other hockey, and it'll be ruined. Because what it is now is pretty violent. Even in minor hockey, I've watched some of the high-level under 13 AAA stuff. The major bantam is good quality hockey, and they do allow a lot of physicality, even for non-contact leagues. And the physicality I see in the higher leagues is good hockey-based stuff. There's a lot of flow to the game. There's a lot of pace. There's a lot of skill being shown. It's not being slowed down by scrums after the whistle and things that you see at the NHL level all the time. So that's where I think women's hockey should go. And I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I didn't know that they did that in Sweden. I hope they do it in other places. And I'm glad to see that. Would I change the rules for fighting to try and eliminate it from the NHL? Well, that's a double-edged question, because fighting is already a penalty in the NHL. It's already a major penalty in the NHL. It's the only major penalty, though, that everyone stands around and actually clears sticks away and allows to happen. They see a buildup. Two players want to commit a major penalty to each other. We're talking intentional headshots, and everyone just backs away and encourages it and lets it happen. To me, fighting, if they got rid of it, I don't see how the game would be that worse off. But what is getting rid of it? I mean, it's already a penalty. It's already a major penalty. The only thing is they don't suspend for it. They just consider it part of the game. Like, it's part of the game as much as tripping is right now, I guess, is the thing. Whereas I don't think it should be as allowable as it is. I wouldn't necessarily change rules. I would just call the instigator rule consistently, like every other rule the NHL has. The problem is they don't call it consistently. If the instigator rule should be applied, apply it. And I don't think that's going to stop people from fighting. I really don't. It hasn't stopped them yet. And even though, like I said, players always say, I don't care whether the hit was clean or dirty, I'm going to fight anyway. To me, give them the instigator if that's their attitude, because obviously they don't respect the rules anyway. They just want to stand up for their teammate. And sometimes, like I said, something that I would do as a player, I tell people this all the time, what I would do as a player is different than what I would do as the Department of Player Safety. Sometimes, believe it or not, I know, big gasp, I find it's worth it to slash a player in the wrist. If they're on me and they're slashing me and doing things that I don't like, sometimes it's worth it for me to turn around and give them a crack. I've done it before. You have to stand up for yourself at some point. The difference between me and other people is when I get a penalty for it, I don't complain because I expect to get punished for it. We shouldn't allow that to happen. So fighting, the same thing. If you think that what someone did is worth fighting over, if you truly believe that what they did is worth going over, grabbing a player, and getting in a fist fight with them during a hockey game, that's great. But you should expect to get, if you're the one that started it, you should expect to get 17 minutes in penalties, because that's what the rules are. You shouldn't say this is a ridiculous rule. And that's where I think people go wrong. Do I think the best fighting to me, and this is the same thing as hitting, checking in hockey. Checking in hockey is the purpose is to separate the opponent from the puck. You use it to serve a hockey purpose. It shouldn't be used as a strategy to eliminate the other team's top players. It shouldn't be used as a strategy to just get your bench up. It shouldn't be used as a strategy to intimidate people from going into areas they should be. If you're doing it for that reason, then you're probably going to do things that are penalties and you should be called for it anyway. Same thing with fighting to me. If you truly are worked up, the best fights to me, I do love a good fight that's bred from emotion, from a time where I would be willing to slash someone. It's the same thing. If they come in and they're doing things to me and I don't like it and I'm worked up and I just feel, oh, I'm so mad at this guy, and I grab him on the spot and you want to go? Go, let's go. Yes, go. And those ones that are just instant and just out of nowhere and you can just see them happen, those are the fights that I love. If those were the only fights that happened, I could actually stay on board with fighting in hockey. What I don't like are, and the NHL has gotten rid of them, or the showboat ones where as soon as the puck's dropped, you drop your gloves and everyone's dancing. There's a good minute and a half build up and everyone's just just step in and stop it. It's a stupid fight. It's doing nothing. It means nothing. And what I don't like is fighting as a strategy for getting your players going. The reason that people claim we have fighting is to keep the game safe. I don't see how fighting as a strategy to get your team back in the game is keeping the game safe. There's no need for that fight. It's useless for me as a Department of Player Safety to keep that fighting. Even though as a fan, and a player, I might want that sometimes. Safety wise, it makes zero sense to keep that type of fight in the game because you're allowing people to break the rules intentionally to get themselves back in a situation where they're being outplayed or whatever it is. Uh, to me, that's not keeping the game safe. That doesn't justify having fighting in hockey. The predetermined fights are stupid, and the fights after clean hits. I hate it when they fight after a clean hit. Of course, we want more hitting, right? I said it at the top of the show. We want more hitting. So why every time there's a big hit do we want the game to stop and slow down, and we want to discourage players from playing clean? If somebody back in when I played, ironically, when everything was supposedly so much more exciting and hitting, it's because when I got hit, I was like, wow, good hit. Huh, you got me. And my teammates were like, huh, keep your head up, Boltsy. Like, they weren't like, oh, I better go after that guy. They were like, better luck next time, big fella. And if somebody gave a suicide pass, they'd say, sorry. It is what it is. They wouldn't go after the guy and fight. I did have my protector. There's a guy named Jeremy Cornish who played on my line 1 year in hockey, and he had a great career as a fighter. He went and played professionally in British, and he has a YouTube channel. You can watch a lot of his fights on YouTube. Jeremy Cornish, look him up, and he's a lot of fun to watch. He was a great character to have, and boy, did I love having him on my side. I appreciated him as a player for when things did go wrong for me and players did try and take advantage of me. He was more than willing to step up and do anything for his teammates. And that's the kind I like. Look, I love the guy, good character. He's the kind of guy you want on your team, and I was grateful to have him around in a lot of situations. But I never asked him to fight at times where I didn't deserve to be hit. Where if I put myself in a bad spot and I got hit, so be it. Don't fight. I'll get them next time. I'd rather go hit the player myself next time. You don't need to fight them. And whenever someone did something to me, I got a lot of joy. Somebody wants to elbow me in the head. Like I said, I enjoyed going to the net. I go to the net and people elbow me, cross-check me, do whatever you want. I'm going to come back. Whether you get called for a penalty or not, it's annoying. You should get called. You don't deserve to win a battle over me if you're cheating and I'm not. But I'm going to keep coming back. And eventually they're going to get a penalty called. And what I'd like to do, instead of fighting that person, I would look at them in the box after I scored on the power play when they're coming out of the box and they're skating to their bench, doing that skate of shame across the ice. And I just say, thanks for that one. You're -1. Appreciate it. That's how I like to get back at them. That's just me, I guess, as a player. And don't get me wrong, I like battles, but I just don't feel the need to avenge every single thing. I guess that's what makes me different about other players. Someone said, when you think of it, when does the crowd respond? After goals, after hits, and during fights. That's what the fans like. Sure, goals, why not? After hits, yeah, crowds respond after hits. We don't need to respond with fighting. The hit does it itself. And what I'm saying is I don't want to take hitting out of the game. And I'm not saying you're accusing me of that. I'm just reiterating. I don't want hitting out of the game. I want big impacts. I want to see big, thunderous checks more than probably anybody. I love them. I don't want to eliminate them. What I want to eliminate is the nonsense that goes after them. And I want to eliminate players forcing them when they're not there. That's what I want. Too many times body checks happen organically. We don't need to add to it. And yes, people do cheer for fights. Everyone always uses that. Everyone's standing during a fight. No one goes to the bathroom during a fight. Yeah, well, I also look at car accidents when I drive by them too. There's just something inherent in that you want to see it. If something's about to get really violent and really crazy, it's exciting. People used to go watch public hangings too, right? Like you never know what's going to entertain people. I don't think the game would be any less exciting without fighting. That's just where I stand on it. And I don't think that people would stop coming to the games if they didn't have fighting. I don't think that the same people who love fighting, I don't think there's enough people who are only in it for the fighting to keep fighting in the game just to appease that fan base. I think the games evolve, things change. And I know hockey purists And I appreciate that you said agreed. Hockey purists say this isn't the hockey they knew anymore. But I don't know what a hockey purist is. That's a term that I don't understand, because if you're a hockey purist, what is what is pure hockey? Do you go all the way back to when goalies weren't allowed to go down on the ice to make a save? Do you go all the way back to when there were seven skaters aside, when there was no lines on the ice, when they didn't allow a forward pass? What is what is perfect hockey? There isn't any one era, right? Like everyone believes that the era they grew up in was the greatest era of hockey. And I do the same thing with music and movies. It'll never be better than when I was a kid. Guess what? For 20 years, I didn't like any new television shows. But now, the TV shows that are on in the last 10 years, Parks and Rec, The Office, uh, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, these are going to go down as my favorite shows of all time. And they're very recent. When for years I didn't believe there would be any better television. Movies, the same thing, right? And hockey, sometimes I watch hockey now and I say, boy, I don't remember ever being able to go this fast. Like, I don't know how I ever survived in a league like this. And then I really take a step back and go, oh, yeah, it's because I didn't. Because hockey wasn't like that when I played. Hockey, back when I played, you were allowed to grab people. You did a drill in practice where you dump the puck in and players would hold on to you, grab your arms. They'd hook their stick in your hip and slow you up from getting to the defender. Blatant interference and obstruction right now. You'd never be able to do that in today's game. It was actually a drill we practiced in practice to do it right, to protect your defense from the puck. So the game evolves, and I got to say, for the better. I wouldn't want players to be able to do that right now. I wouldn't want players to be able to get away with some of the things I got away with. So whether we like it or not, the game is going to change in some way or another. So if we can have some input as to how the game changes. Thank you. No, I don't stream every Saturday. This is the first time I ever tried it. I didn't know how it would go. But I think I might stream more based on the way this has gone. This has been fantastic, and I appreciate the live chat, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day with me. Have a great day and enjoy the game tonight. I know I will. So we just have to be careful about, like I said, how the game evolves. It's going to change whether we like it or not. So this is why I encourage these discussions, so that maybe the right set of eyes will see what the public wants, what fans want, and maybe we can have some input and change it the way that benefits the most people. Liam McDowell 19 asks, I like math. Twitter user I like math asks, who do you think is the best at delivering consistent clean checks, in the NHL, and why? Who do I think is the best at delivering consistent clean checks in the NHL, and why? So a few names come to mind. Mo Seider is my favorite one right now. Detroit Red Wings. There's a guy who, if you watch his checks, there's very little explosion and there's very little upward thrust. He even does these reverse hits. Now, I could do a whole live stream on reverse hits. I don't believe reverse hits are a thing. I'm not saying they're illegal. I'm just saying, why do we call them reverse hits? They're just hits like any other. If you call them reverse hits by a different name, then you're going to treat them differently. You're going to let players get away with things like exploding upward. I don't see why you should be able to explode upward or throw your arms back and raise your arms up and your elbows up just because you're not facing the player you're hitting. I don't know why. If I did that coming at you, that I did that and jumped up and did all that, why is that any different than if I turn my back and lunge at you? Why do all of a sudden the rules change? So I don't think we should call reverse hits. I think we should just look at them like hits like any other. And either you do them wrong or you don't. I think Mo Seider is the best at that. I think he's the best at stepping down on players coming out of the wall. I think he takes the best angles. I just think he's the best at it. Another player that's really good at it is Romanov, Alex Romanov. He's got some of the best hits on my YouTube channel. And they're not dirty. They're clean. But they're explosive. He takes a great angle and puts himself in a situation where players are going to hit him. I think all players are inherently capable of this. I just don't think they're asked to do it enough. I think they can get away with it. Ryan Reeves is one of the worst hitters to me. He should be the best at it. It's part of his job. He throws more hits than anybody, but he's one of the worst at it. Not because I don't think he's capable of doing it properly, but because he's never asked to do it properly. And he's always looking for the highest amount of impact, the highest amount of damage in those checks. So he's exactly the reason why you need to tone things down and change the way we approach hitting so that players like him can hit the right way and be a valuable contributing member without causing danger, without putting himself in the line of fire for suspensions, that sort of thing. I want players like Ryan Reaves to thrive in the game by being really good at throwing body checks, but I want them to be clean. And if you can't do that without leaving your feet, without lunging up, without exploding, then again, you probably don't deserve a roster more than someone like Cale McCarr, who is, I know he doesn't do it a lot, but is one of the better hitters in the league. I think, honestly, the players that will be the best hitters are also the players that are the best skaters. And that's what we got to look at is the skating ability, the ability to be able to constantly readjust your angle appropriately, to keep your feet down in a glide so that you can make those subtle adjustments so that at the moment of impact, you're fully down in a squat and you're fully ready to absorb it. And you're not having to almost miss and reach out. That's when players start to go wrong. So the best players, Mo Sider is one of my favorites, but the best players that are the best players at hitting are naturally the ones that are also the best skaters, which would also be probably the best players at handling the puck and doing all the other things skill-wise that relate to hitting with a skilled purpose. And I think if you look at some of Mo Sider's hits, you'll see the ones where maybe he goes off the rails a little bit, and you'll see he has more than enough that are perfectly clean, and they're fine examples of players being able to stay low. They look different than some of the higher impact ones that we might cheer more for because they look crazier, but it's because of the violence of impact that's needlessly created by players doing something wrong. So if you put Mo Sider's hits side by side with other players like I have in the past, you'll see the difference. And I think he's one of the best ones at it. I think players should look to him. Why do guys push attacking players into their own goalie? Q's the Kid, Twitter user, asks, I don't know. My favorite is when they push someone into their own goalie. And then when the goalie gets mad, they jump the player as if they need to be the hero and protect their goalie from what? Themselves? I don't get it. This is another type of thing I don't understand. Why would you ever push yourself on a goalie? Now, I can tell you why I think they do it, because they're getting beat and they don't want to give up a scoring chance. And they have to push them somehow, but they got beat, so they're behind them. And they cross-check or shove or push players towards the net and onto their own goalie. It's because they don't want to get beat. They don't want to admit they got beat. They don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to give up a goal. They'd rather knock that player off stride and hope their goalie's okay than give them a free shot at the net, which I understand from a player point of view. But from a Department of Player Safety point of view, we need to ask those players to let them go. If they do that, it should be called a penalty every time so that they stop doing it. And if they fight a player after that, hi, Nick, thank you. Thank you for saying hello. Thanks for the kind words about my content. I appreciate your support. We should just punish these players and ask them not to do that, player safety wise. And if they, like I said, if they fight the player that they push onto the goalie because they feel like now they need to step up and defend their goalie, then that's a great time to use the instigator penalty. It's a perfect time. Call it. Call the rule book in any situation. I have a few more questions here that are written down. How do you feel about a system where infractions would be punished by severity, kind of like burns, first and second degree? I like that analogy. In my opinion, not all slashes are the same and not all trips are the same. That's what my system does. If you look, I have a video called What is Tough Call, and it breaks down my punishment system. I have hockey plays gone wrong. I have fines. Fines to me aren't punishments, not the piddly little fines they have now. If you want to fine for punishment purposes, you need to really up the dollar amount. Otherwise, those are warnings. So you can give those to players who haven't necessarily done anything severely wrong, but you want to warn them that there's a bad habit they have that you've noticed. So you want to prevent before bad things happen. Then 1 to 2 game suspensions are for hockey plays gone wrong. people who are hockey focused and doing things the right way with their stick down and all that, but they get a little carried away, and the result of what they've done is more than just your run of the mill penalty. So that's what I already do. Right now, the way they do it is it's either a penalty and a suspension and throw the book at a guy, or it's nothing at all. I don't know why they do that. And to them, throwing the book at them, I mean, is 1 to 2 game suspensions. There's never a fine line there. And they're so inconsistent with it as far as one time a cross check will be nothing, not even a 2-minute minor. And then another time it will be a $5,000 fine and a major penalty. To me, there's not enough in between, and players are really having a hard time with the inconsistency, knowing what they should do. So they keep doing it, and then sometimes they get it wrong, and sometimes they don't. In my system, I think it's very important to have infractions based on severity. To me, for instance, cross-checking, there's no need to cross-check someone on the shoulder. No need. If you cross-check them near the pants or whatever, it's a 2-minute minor. Depending on force, if you hit them forcefully enough, it's a 5-minute major. But if you hit them on the pants and you're just kind of trying to push and you get a little carried away, that's a 2-minute minor. If you start to get up here and cross-check them, now you're getting into possible 5-minute major territory, but 2-minute minor. If you cross-check them here or here, that's an automatic 5. Anywhere near the neck or head, it's a 5-minute major. Automatic. Cross-check them. I don't care about force. You have no reason to have your stick up there by their head anyway. If you want to cop out, you can use a double minor for high sticking. If you don't think the cross-check was forceful enough, give them a double minor for high sticking. But if it's forceful enough that you're going to call it a cross-check, then that means it was forceful enough to cause danger to the head and neck area. So that's your 5-minute major. Right now, the way the cross-check rule is written, doesn't matter. It's about force. You could hit a guy in the ear, and if it's not forceful enough to be a penalty, it's legal, fair game. I don't subscribe to that. I think you need to get away from that. So my system sort of does do that. It gives people basic standards. Same as slashing. If you slash someone's stick, that means you were kind of puck focused. Once you start to get up the shaft, it gets a little more dangerous. Anywhere near the hands, automatic penalty. You shouldn't have any reason to slash anywhere near the hands. You need to be in more control of your stick. And then if you really hit someone on the hands with a forceful slash, boom, you're in the suspension. You're in the suspension realm. But there's a warning there. You can't just slash someone in the hands lightly and get away with it repeatedly and then accidentally hit them too hard and get a suspension and wonder, what did I do wrong? What was the difference between what I did before? So I think it's very important to have an incremental system. And then for me, the further removed things get from a hockey play, you too. Thank you. Thank you for viewing. The more removed it gets from a hockey play, also, the more punishment you'll get, because I want you to stay hockey focused. So you're rewarded for playing clean, and you're punished more for playing dirty. And if the result of what you did from a dirty play gets bad enough, then that's when I can throw the book at you. But you've had all these warnings to figure out what you're doing wrong and have a lot of chances to correct it before you ever get to that point. So I think it's very, very important. What's my editing process and how long does it take? This is asked by Closet Hockey Fan 5284 on YouTube. My editing process used to be a lot more detailed than it is. It used to be a lot more cumbersome, but as I've gotten better, it's a lot faster for me. My sister is a big help. She asked a question earlier. She sends me clips. I send her a message that says, hey, did this play? I want this. It happened at such and such a time. Somehow she gets me a clip, and I just sit there and twiddle my thumbs and watch the game and get all excited watching the hockey until the clip comes in my inbox. Then when I get it, I actually do everything in iMovie. I'm very basic. I'm just a man with an iPhone. I do everything in iMovie. I get the clip, I edit it in iMovie, I take the sound off. And the reason I do the sound off, by the way, I know a lot of people ask, is because I want you to focus on the play itself. Too many times we get emotionally impacted. We hear the crowd noise, the excitement. We hear the noise of the impact. We see the jersey of the player. It's too focused on everything besides what we need to focus on, which is, did the player delivering the check do something wrong or right? And I don't care who it is, what team they play for, what history they have, what reputation they have, what the score of the game was, what the moment of the game was. I just want to look at the incident and judge it based on that. And that's what I want you to see. If you want to go watch the highlights, there's plenty of other YouTube streamers that play the clip. And I also don't want to see the garbage that happens after. If I want to focus on the hit, I want the hit and I want a replay of the hit. I don't want the hit and then I have to wait for a minute and a half of scrums and penalty calls and gear collection. I don't want to see that in my videos. I want to look at the hit. I want to see the replay and I want to get out. And that's the way I look at hockey too. I want to see a hit. I want the play to continue. I want the game to move on. I don't want to see the scrums and all that. So I guess that's just who I am. So that's my editing process. I cut out all the dead wood. I cut out all the noise, the distractions, and I just show the hit in real time. Then I show a couple of replays that focus on the part of the hit I want to look at, and then I post it. Takes me very little time, 5 minutes, 5 minutes per video, probably. What takes longer is me doing the ones where I actually do the commentary and I make my assessment. But really all that is me watching the clips and doing the voiceover. So it just takes me longer to edit out some of the mistakes I make when I talk, or if I say something and then I want to change the way I say it, I re-record. It is what it is. It takes me about 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes of video. So posting it, getting the clip, getting the time to edit, finding a quiet spot to do my voiceovers, that's what takes the time. So from the time I see something and want to post it to the time I actually get it posted is longer than I would like. But the actual editing process doesn't take that much time at all. I'm pretty basic. Everything's done on my phone. It's good enough for me. I'm learning as I go, just like this. This is my first YouTube Live. Hopefully I get better at it as I go, but I'm excited to have the technology. The most important thing for me is the content and the discussion. It's not about having a fancy desk and all the glitz and glamour of music in the background and things like that. It's about the discussion, the content. Why do I do videos about slightly illegal checks? Thanks guys for tuning in from Straight Off the Pipe podcast. Enjoy the game tonight. I know you're an Oilers fan, so enjoy the game tonight, buddy. Talk to you later, I'm sure, in our group chat. So the same reason I put any of videos out is the same reason I put slightly illegal checks. I'm about clean checks, I'm about dirty hits, and I'm about slightly illegal ones, because you'd be surprised. Things that I think are clean, I'll put it out there and people will comment, that's the dirtiest thing I've ever seen. And some people will say it's the cleanest thing I've ever seen. So it's not about necessarily what I think. I'm not going to post something and say, I think this is dirty right away, because that won't generate discussion. I want to post things and I call it have your say, because I literally want you to have your say. And maybe you'll change the way I look at things, because I want to grow and learn as a person too, as a hockey fan too. So I put slightly illegal checks because to me, a slightly illegal check or slightly clean check to someone else is the thing they want to see out of the game. And I'm curious to hear that point of view. There's never been a play in my life where I've posted and everyone has agreed that it was clean. There's not one time, not one single time where I've put a hit up and everyone has said, yeah, clean. There's always somebody that thinks someone did something wrong. And there's not one time at the flip side where I put a hit that's obviously dirty, where everyone has said obviously dirty. To some people, everything is clean and let it happen. And that's what hockey is. And to some people, everything is dirty. And there's a lot of people in between. So that's why I put things that to me are just mundane checks, because you never know what kind of discussion you're going to get. And that's the beauty of my site, is the discussion. The hundreds of comments I see every day really make me think that we're going in the right place with this. Johnny Beats 80. Why was Makar suspended a game for a clean late hit, yet Cogliano gets folded like a pretzel from a hit from behind, suffers a fractured neck, and there's no disciplinary action from the league? Seems backwards, and would love to hear your opinion. So I did a video, an 8 or 9 minute video ranking 4 hits. The Makar hit, the Cogliano hit, a Pat Maroon hit on Giordano, and then another hit I can't remember at the time. I'm going to focus on the Makar hit and Cogliano hit, which was actually the Jordan Eberle hit, I guess. Makar, it was so late. It was so late. The fact that he only got one game shocks me. Uh, the fact that he got any games shocks me in the real NHL. But in terms of what they say, the reason for the suspension was, it was so massively late. They said all the right things in their video, and then to only give it one game makes no sense to me because they said every reason why it was dirty, and then they only give it one game as if it's the most mundane clean check. Whereas Jordan Eberle, it's obviously dirty, but they don't give any punishment at all. And I'll tell you why. It's because to them, this is one of those things we just talked about. To me, it's an obviously dirty hit. To them, it's not obviously dirty. And honestly, to me, some people think it's really obviously like super dirty. To me, it's no more dirty than the other dirty hits that I post. I don't think it was the worst check I've ever seen, like some people say. I think Makar's was actually worse in terms of violence for what would be expected in the situation. Nobody in Jared McCann's place should have been expecting any kind of contact at all, let alone a super violent hit like the one that happened. So the extreme lateness of the hit and the extreme violence in a situation where a player shouldn't have been hitting at all, that's what got him the suspension. And I fully am on board with suspending him for that. And I would have given him a higher suspension than the NHL. To me, that was the worst one out of the bunch because it was so unexpected and so pointless, hockey purpose-wise. The Cogliano one, Jordan Eberle, at least Jordan Eberle was trying to make a hockey play. At least that player had the puck. Now, make a hockey play in terms of it was a hockey situation where someone should expect contact. To me, it was a non-hockey play because he didn't do anything to try and get the puck. He was trying to hit in a situation where hitting wasn't acceptable. The angle of approach from behind to me, violently into the boards. It was a combination of boarding, okay, and it wasn't really from behind. That's the key. So the reason I don't think he got a suspension is because they'll say it was from the side because he actually caught him in the hip. And Cogliano went into the boards back first like this. He didn't go into the boards head first like this. He went into the boards back first and his shoulders hit and his neck crumpled like that. That can't happen if it's truly from behind, according to the NHL. To me, it's all about angle of approach. It was a terrible angle of approach where he was never going to be able to hit him from the front. But because contact happened to a spot on Cogliano's body where it was the side of the hip, they're going to use that as an excuse to say it was more from the side than from behind. So it wasn't from behind. So it wasn't a suspendable offense. It could have been a boarding penalty, but it wasn't suspendable. That's probably the thought process that went behind it. For me, the real culprit wasn't whether it was from behind or not. It was the terrible angle of approach, making the contact always going to be dangerous. So I would have suspended him for 4 games, I think I said. I'm not sure. 4, I think. Maybe 5. 5 games. I would have given Makar 6 games. I would have given Eberle 5 games because of degree of avoidability and situation. But in Eberle's place, it was more about angle of approach and preventableness that way. Whereas in Makar's case, it was more about having nothing to do with hockey and easily preventable and avoidable in a situation where contact shouldn't have even been expected. Just a couple more questions here. There was a longer question at the end that I'm gonna tell you the question, and then I'm gonna save it because we're almost an hour and a half. I'm gonna end it here. I'm gonna save this question because it's so good and such a lengthy discussion for another time. How long before the NHLPA and player safety come together collectively to come to the conclusion that hits like Eberle's on Cogliano don't need to be part of the game anymore and to start to try to get those hits under control, with the most important caveat being, and when do people begin to realize that as much as we love to blame player safety and officiating for suspensions and fines, the Players Association sets the maximum for fines under the collective bargaining agreement. So when do we realize the players seem to be perfectly fine with the status quo And until they demand a higher standard as a whole thing, things are probably not going to change. When do we figure that out? So I appreciate that question. That's a large, broad discussion, and I think I'll do another YouTube live another time, and I'm going to focus on that question specifically. So look for that. Give you something to look forward to. Somebody just joined late. Oh, how does my system deal with repeat offenders like Truba, Bennett, and Wilson? Uh, Repeat offenders. It's the question we talked about with a succession. So repeat offenders in my system would have plenty of warning to know that they're doing things wrong because it would be called consistently and they could say, why do I keep getting penalties? We could have a discussion about that. And then for the most basic things, we give them fines, very small fines as warnings, and they'll say, what's that about? And you can warn them. So they'll have had 2 or 3 chances to get things right before they ever get into the realm of suspension. So they'd already be knowing what they did wrong. So when they do it wrong again, you can really go after them because now they're in the system. It's on record that you talk to them. And then obviously if they get to that point where they're doing it still, and then if they do it another time, well, you can go super hard on them because you've given them so much warning and so much education on what they should be doing differently. That's how my system would deal with repeat offenders, is to stop them from happening to begin with. Therefore, when they do happen, you can certainly give them longer suspensions and punishments. Just basic consistency. That's all it is. That's always the problem. Consistency. Why is something that I did another time not called and now it's called? Why is something that that player did not called and then when I do it, it is called? They're not going to learn how to do things properly if we can't even call it properly in the moment. So that's how I deal with repeat offenders, is by hopefully preventing them before they ever happen. So I'm going to end it right there. I appreciate everybody tuning in. It was really fun talking to you, seeing the questions come up live. And hopefully I do this again real soon. Enjoy the hockey. Let's go Oilers.